Welcome back to the Life of Tash. I'm Tash. So let's be real today. I'm sure that some of you out there aren't just more than a little curious when you hear the word kink. Some of you might just be a little bit weirded out as well. And I understand there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of myths about kink and what kind of person actually enjoys this stuff. But here's the thing. A lot of those stories, a lot of those myths, maybe they're just stopping you from getting to know yourself a bit better. Maybe they're stopping you from being really honest or building really strong, deep connections. So today I'm going through the top 5 kink myths that keep normal people from engaging. So I'm going to show you how you can stop playing small and by the end, hopefully have a whole new perspective on what kink is. Let's start with myth 1, that kink is only for sexual deviants or freaks. So look, like with most things in life, kink sits on a spectrum of human desire. We all have a need for play, we all have a need for power and for deep connection. And curiosity is also really natural part of being human. It's also a very healthy part of being human. But I think this myth comes from people not really understanding what kink is. Kink is actually just an umbrella term. I think a lot of the times people assume that kink equals BDSM, which it does not. BDSM sits under kink as an umbrella term. It's just one type of kink. It can be things of fantasies. It can be dirty talk. It could be group sex. Basically, it's anything that is other than what you'd call vanilla sex, which is just like not normal sex. I hate saying that word, but it's just anything that is mainstream or considered like the normal sexual acts. Anything other than that, which can be so many things, is basically kink. So when you think of it in that term, I truly believe that everyone has a kink out there. They might not have discovered it yet, but I think pretty much all of us would have some sort of kink if we went exploring and got curious enough. Now, this is the other thing. What one person considers vanilla can greatly differ to the next person's idea of what vanilla is. But here's the thing, there's no prize for being the kinkiest. And I think sometimes in today's world of the internet and porn is that people try to start out kink each other. So people get this idea that kink has to be extreme or, freaky, but it's not. It can be a really beautiful way to engage in personal growth and really explore yourself in embodied ways. You don't need to be extreme to participate in it. Kink is a consent-based world. Anything outside of enthusiastic, embodied consent is simply not kink. So when people are talking about being deviant, I don't link that with kink because that kind of gives me an idea of someone doing something that is not in a consensual manner. I often find people who project this disapproving feelings towards kink often have a lot of personal sexual repression. Look, many of us weren't brought up with the language to even talk about sex, let alone kink and sex as pleasure. So I'm not surprised that many of us don't even have the language to explore it. Maybe we were lucky enough to get it explained from a reproductive point of view, but often it was followed with messages of don't do it. And again, messages around pleasure were surrounded by shame and a lot of judgment often. Rewiring that takes a lot of work and a lot of, embodied practices. And look, judgment doesn't just come from outside or the messages we weren't or were told as children, but it also comes from within. I've said many times as my work as a pro-dom, there's probably about, 85% of my clients, I'm the only one that knows about their kink. And it's one of the reasons I started my brand, which is to, educate, empower, and de-shame, because I really believe that we need to embrace these different parts of ourselves in a more healthy way. And I know there's messaging from society. It exists on a multitude of levels. Women are told to prioritize the pleasure of their partner. We're told that we should orgasm after 2 minutes of penetrative sex. Men, there's a lot of pressure around, they should be dominating in the bedroom, and, their worth is linked to how big their erection is. So we are surrounded by these really hard messaging when it comes to sex and kink. We're taught that to surrender is a weakness. What we think of sex should just remain between ourselves. Aftercare, isn't that just falling asleep? To me, kink and sex education, they're almost the same thing, because you can't really have one without the other. Kink to me is just a sexier way of talking about it. But most people's memories of sex education is probably being in year 8 and learning how to put a condom on a banana. So let's talk about myth 2, that kink is all about pain and cruelty. Again, a lot of people think kink is just BDSM. So hopefully we've dispelled that myth now. Kink is just an umbrella term for many, many activities. So when you are talking about the pain aspect, a lot of people just straight away, when you hear about kink or BDSM, their response is like, oh, I'm not into pain, because they think that's what it is, because that's what we see in movies. And again, what we see in porn, that it's dark, it's scary, and it's rooted in like painful activities or someone yelling at you or being really aggressive and cruel to you. But the truth is that it's not about that. It's about connection. It's about sensation. It's about exploring parts of yourself. It's about being with someone you really trust. Now, look, I'm not going to say pain is never involved, because for some it is part of their kink. But there's a crucial difference between pain and what you're doing in a kink scene. The fact is that kink is negotiated, it's consented, and it's rooted in trust. You're not surrendering or engaging to play with someone who's cruel or just out for themselves or to be mean to you. You should be with someone or with people who are deeply committed to your safety and your pleasure and your own growth. There are so many kink activities that don't involve pain. I actually think there's more activities that don't involve pain than do. And even when we do think of activities that involve pain, it's not really the traditional understanding of the word pain. The pain you experience isn't for suffering just for suffering's purpose. It's a chosen sensation. It can be a jolt that really brings you back into your body. It can be a sting that heightens every other sensation that you can feel. Or it can be something that brings you into a really safe space so you feel truly alive. So this leads us to the most powerful and transformative concept in the entire kink world. And I mentioned it before, but consent, it really is the ultimate form of power exchange. Now, most people think that consent is just a simple yes or no at the beginning, but that's kind of just a watered down version. We're talking about consensual, ongoing, living, breathing consent. It's a conversation that is always going on, and consent can be revoked at any time. You have the power to stop a scene or play whenever you want. You don't need to explain it. There doesn't need to be a reason. That is the type of consent we're talking about. That's where trust and safety come from. So let's come into myth number 3. You have to be an expert to start. Now, I know a lot of people shy away from kink exploration because they don't feel that they have the knowledge. And believe me, I know this all too well. In my personal life, some people get a little bit shy to engage in any kinky play with me because of my profession. And look, I get it. From the outside, people who are already in the kink community can seem like they speak a secret language that you just don't know yet. or that they've got years and years of experience, and you know, they probably have a closet at home with a curated toy collection. But to be real, like, that's not very often. But I do understand that it keeps many people from taking that first step. The thing is, kink is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't need to be trained as a pro dom or have that toy cabinet as large as your wardrobe to be classified as kinky. You don't even need to belong to a kink community to be kinky. You might be 40 years in a monogamous marriage and be the kinkiest person around. That's not how you define it. Kink starts with a conversation. Literally, if you are able to have a conversation with someone, you are able to be kinky. Someone's willingness to talk about desire, consent, boundaries, negotiation, you've already started. It's the moment that you start that inner dialogue with yourself, asking, what would I be curious to explore in a safe space? That's the first step of empowerment, and it requires no equipment, no training, no experience. It literally just requires you. So if you've been feeling like you're not kinky enough, or maybe you're worried about looking foolish, let's just put that belief to rest. Your authentic self doesn't need to pass a test to be valid. The path begins with not a bold act, but with a quiet internal shift. And with anything we learn in life, we just need to start. We need to see where it goes and where we're curious and take action and find out what we want and what we want to explore more. I always struggle with the concept that sex and kink is the one area in life where we just think we should know how to do it. I mean, if I decided to be a professional basketball player tomorrow, I wouldn't expect us to get on a court and win a game. I'd expect I'd have to study, to learn, to practice lots and lots. But when it comes to kink and sex, everyone just assumes we should know it. Why is it any different? So let's talk about myth number 4. Kink means you're broken or unhealed. I love this one. It's one I hear all the time. But look, kink is not a symptom of unhealed trauma. So let's just put that one to rest. It can actually be a really powerful tool for healing. And research has shown that the incidence of trauma in the kink community versus the rest of the population is not higher. So there is no factual evidence to that myth. The reality is that we all carry some trauma. It'd be pretty difficult to get through life without having some sort. Now, I don't mean you need to have some huge traumatic event happen to you, but it could just even micro or small traumas we're all going to experience. And let's just be clear, a traumatic event is what happens to you. Trauma is what happens inside of us. It can be a wound on our internal psyche or on our nervous system. And this wound can leave a really lasting imprint. It can make you feel less flexible, less connected to life, or maybe more rigid, maybe more judgmental, or maybe just not feeling your authentic self is able to survive. So conscious kink can actually provide a really safe space to explore and integrate different emotions, sensations, power dynamics, and past experiences. This is exactly the type of work that I do in my coaching. We're trying to rewire our relationship to things that we normally try to maybe ignore, hide, or disown. We are not broken. Let's be really clear. None of us are broken. We do not need to be fixed. We can create new neural pathways with love, and we can integrate all parts of our being. I actually think people who engage in kink are likely much more healthy and functioning because they're able to identify different emotions, different sensations, different feelings when it comes to their body-mind. They can move through uncomfortable things and still meet that with love and with loving all sides of themselves. So that brings us to our last myth number 5, that kink is just for the bedroom. When people hear the word kink, they often think of like bedroom, dungeon, just something behind a closed door. It's separate from real life. But what I've discovered with my work is that kink is something that becomes part of everything in your life. It's kind of like a superpower, is how I say. The things that you learn, you really start to embody. Things like how to communicate, negotiate, putting in strong boundaries, self-advocacy, power dynamics, and so much more. These things don't just exist in kink. They exist in every part of your life, from the boardroom to the way you carry yourself in a supermarket. I've never worked with a client who has not expanded in every aspect of their life from the work that they've done in kink. And it's not just from, self-growth aspects. It's the way you are able to live your life in a more pleasure-filled way. Someone who knows how to explore their desires, someone who is curious, and someone who knows the essence of their being. So that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope through learning a bit more, you feel a bit more empowered to stop playing small. And maybe it's time to realize that you are not broken, your desires are not a flaw, and that you can live a much more turned on life through kink. And to everyone at home, stay kinky.